and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to unbox the July's Elves box Fairy Garden theme. I'm only recording this video now because my July box got lost in the mail, and luckily the customer service at Sophie and Toffee was really kind and sent me a new one which just arrived. Now, since it's already September, of course the codes are expired and we already know what's in the mold making box, but let's have a look inside this box. First off, we have some AB epoxy resin, and this is their 1:1 ratio one. Then we get a bottle of UV resin for silicone molds. Next up we have this really beautiful shiny foil that comes in this plastic bag, and I'm really excited to use them. Then we have our first mold, and this one is the fairy door. You can prop this door up against a tree, against a wall, and it will look like you have a little tiny fairy living at your house. And this mold has some really beautiful details with the wood grain and all of the decorations around the trim of the door. Next up we have the mushroom house mold. Now, I've heard many people complain that they thought it was bigger, but I think this is more than enough for a cute display piece. And I have to say, this mold seems to be also really detailed. The doors are really detailed with all the stones and the hinges around. There's some lines that a normal mushroom would also have, and then we have the cute windows and stuff. I really am excited for this mold in particular. And we also get this wooden base, and I already plugged it in to show you how bright it is. And this has this really warm yellow light, which I prefer personally for decoration, because it just looks way more friendly. And we also get a funnel and 3 adorable mushroom decorations, 1 in red and 2 in green. Next up we have these metal butterfly embellishments, and these are very hard to show on camera, but I hope you can see them. They're basically tiny golden-ish butterflies. And we also get some of Sophie and Toffee's Morandi pigment dyes. I don't know how opaque they are, I've never used them, but I'm excited to see them in this box because they look gorgeous with these colors they chose. We also get this deer inside of one of those plastic containers, and this you can either leave it or paint it and put it as decoration in one of your molds. And I'm a really big fan of these types of embellishments. Next up we have the smaller door mold with maybe 2 earrings and 1 necklace, I'm not too sure. And these ones are obviously a little less detailed than the large doors, but I find they still look adorable and beautiful. And the detail is just enough for it to look really good as a door. We also get this nail art applicator, and they included it for applicating like mica powders and stuff in your molds way more easily and way mess free. And it originally is for applying images to your nails, and it also comes with the original scraper for nail art. And then we get this 6-pack of glitters, and they come in various sizes, and they are like more like unicorn foil glitters. Really pretty. But sadly, I don't know what this is with Sophie and Toffee's packaging. When they come packed like this, I always have glitter everywhere. You can see it in the package, and it just falls everywhere in the box and contaminates everything. So I already know I will find glitters everywhere in my house for the next few weeks. And lastly we have these really beautiful wing molds that I was looking forward to, and these should be a perfect size for some dolls. And that should be everything, so now let's have a look in the booklet. And I really love the cover of this one. Now, Sophie and Toffee mostly includes important tips for specific molds they include, or for specific resins or stuff they include, so it's always good to check the booklet first. So if you want to have any tips or tricks for using silicone molds, you can just pause this video. And sometimes they also have information next to the items they provide in the box. And here we can see that all of the molds they included are exclusive, so the mushroom, the doors, and also the fairy wings. Which means you can only get them in this Elves box. On the next page we have all the glitters and stuff, and I did not really realize, but I must not have recorded it, but there was a little tiny sapling or sprout inside for an inclusion, and I saw it in my box, but somehow I must have missed the footage of it. On the next page we see the rose gold butterflies a little bit better, and they also show all of the holographic transfer films, which I didn't want to unpack yet because I know they're pretty staticky and I didn't want to have to deal with trying to get them back into the package before I want to use them. And of course the miniature plastic funnel, which I think they included for the mushroom mold. And here we have the March Honeybee Box Challenge winner, and I think this is a really beautiful piece with all the honeycombs they used. And with that, let's get right into a project. Now, I see most people use this mold put together and put like beautiful pigments in and stuffs, but I decided I wanted to make a little scenery, so I wanted to make it like a real house. So what I did, I coated the UV resin inside the mold and then cured it, and I did it in part. So I chose one corner, cured the resin, chose the next corner, cured the resin, so that I would have an even layer inside this mold. Now, if you want to have a crystal clear piece with really even layers inside, I would probably suggest you put the mold together, put in some UV resin, and then turn it while curing under the UV light. But since it didn't matter too much if the coats were really even, I just went with this approach. Now next up it's time to make some decorations for inside the house, and I decided to make a ladder from the first floor to the second floor, and I made it by using copper wires that I cut into really tiny pieces because I thought that wooden stirring sticks or something would be way too large for this project scale. So I used tape to fixate the little steps and the side beams of the ladder, because this will help me just place it where I want it. And then I'm using some UV resin to cover the ladder to secure everything. I'm sure you can use some glue to glue each and every step in place, but I really didn't want to have to deal with that. Now I made some really tiny first floorboards with some old stirring sticks, and I just secured them together with UV resin and then also glued them inside my half mushrooms with UV resin. And I left a little space inside for where the ladder would go, where they could go upstairs. And then it was time for more furniture, and I used some of my old stirring sticks, and I just cut them to size, and I'm going to make a bed, a table and 2 chairs with just some tiny pieces of wood. And I know they will look a bit jaggedy. I could have sanded them beforehand, but I thought this like kind of rough wooden look would fit best for this kind of scenery. So I just used some tiny squares that I layered for the chairs, and then a larger square with 2 tiny squares on the bottom for the table, and for the bed I propped up the middle part where the mattress would be with some wooden pieces, and then used some rounded edges for the sides, or the headboard as you might call it. And then I just used my sanding tools to kind of sand the rough parts of the edges a bit down. Then it was time to paint my mushroom, and I first painted on the inside. Now I could have just chosen to paint it on the outside, but I decided if you would have a look inside it would probably look best to paint the inside like wallpaper. And I chose to stay with the colors of the mushroom, so red on top and white on the bottom, and then I used some darker brown for the floorboard, and I dry brushed some brownish white later on to give them some more structure. Now you may see some tiny holes where I have missed parts with my UV resin, but I just cover them up from the outside and paint the used parts also. And then I use some brown paint and paint the frames of the windows to make them look more detailed. And now it's time to decorate the furniture a bit more, so I'm just using some tiny felt pieces for the blanket of the bed and for the pillow, and I'm also making a little table cloth for the table and some covers for the chair, or like seat cushions, I guess. To join the 2 parts together, I just used some really tiny globs of UV resin, and the beginning was a bit harder, so I just put them together on the bottom and used a bit more to see them in first. But after that it was just a matter of adding tiny bits and then curing them and then adding the next tiny bit. And I purposefully left the hole in the top open if I wanted to insert light on there. And then it was time to paint the outside, and I chose to use a base coat of white to have it easier with the colors, and then for the bottom I used a tiny bit of brown and I kind of dry brushed it to make it look like an aged weathered mushroom a bit more. And later on I'm also adding the door, which sadly was totally off frame, and I only realized that while editing. But I just used some grey for the stones around the door, and then some brown for the door, some blackish grey for the hinges, and some red for the doorknob. And then I'm painting the top of the mushroom. I decided I wanted to blend the red and the white of the mushroom, so I'm just using my fingers on the edges and try to blend in the colors a bit while they're still wet. And then I paint the dot of the mushroom in white, and I'm also adding some brown frames around the windows. And lastly I varnished this piece of camera, and with that the mushroom house is finished. Now I wanted the door to be much simpler since the last project was a little bit more time consuming, so I just used some shaved down pieces of my chalk pastels and just rubbed them in with an eyeshadow applicator, because I thought mica powders would be way too shiny for all of the door. I then later used some gold micas around the trim and around the hinges, but otherwise I'm completely sticking to my chalk pastels. And then I decided to use the black Morandi pigment color because I thought it would look best as a contrasting color. And let me tell you, these are super opaque and they look really beautiful. And while the door was curing, I decided to make some wings, and I found the best way to cut out the holographic film was to first pour a tiny little layer of resin in the wing shapes and cure it, and then take them out and cut out the holographic film, put them back in, apply the film in, and then put the rest of the resin on top. And I tried cutting the film while it was inside the molds, but I found that it was just ripping, so taking the pieces out and applying it later definitely was the way to go. And they look really beautiful. And then I just used some of the pretty glitters and mixed them into the resin, and I used some of the finer and some of the larger pieces and mixed them and just poured them into the top wing mold. And I think this also looks really, really beautiful, and I can imagine using this as a decoration. Now, the door turned out really, really pretty, but sadly, even though I used a lot of green pigment powders, the black kind of covers it. So I just mixed some clear glossy varnish with some mica powders and I applied them directly. And this will give them a really pretty shimmer. And after that, we are finished with all the projects. And here you can see inside the mushroom house to the windows. And sadly with the pure eye it's a bit harder to see, but with my camera you can really see the details of the table and the bed. And I think this turned out really, really beautiful, although it looks kind of jaggedy with the light on bottom. And here you can see all of my finished projects together. And out of the holographic film wings I made a Zelda type fairy necklace, which turned out really, really cute. So I think the July box had some really, really beautiful molds and items. The only thing I personally didn't like was first how difficult it was to cut the holographic foils, but I could work a way around it, and second of all, how much glitter I had to clean up after this, because it spilled everywhere and I can still find glitter in random places, which is just because the box wasn't really sealed that well. Although the mushroom mold and the door mold were super adorable and really, really beautifully made, if I had to choose one mold that was my favorite out of this box, I would definitely choose the wing mold, because you can use it for so many things: bracelets, dolls, decorations, anything you can think of basically. And I really love how detailed they got with it. What I also really liked was that the illuminating base was USB powered with a button and not battery powered, because I always find it annoying if something is battery powered and you can't use it all the time because the battery gets weaker and weaker. Anyways, that's all for today's video. I'm hoping you have a great day. Bye!